hours. We are, as we have gotten used to, waiting for the Prime Minister to address the nation today, expected at around 11:30 a.m. Eastern today, as well as a really critical moment inside, an extraordinary moment inside Parliament, where 32 MPs or so, just a handful really, will soon vote. The debate and the questions will start at noon on an $82 billion aid package that is meant to help Canadians try to get through this pandemic. We've already heard today from the opposition leader Andrew Scheer. He is amongst the 11 Conservative MPs in Ottawa today to vote on the government's COVID-19 relief package. Scheer was asked about the Liberals' initial draft, which would have given them extraordinary taxation and spending powers right up until the end of 2021.
Well, the biggest concern was that we've been having a conversation for the past few days about providing assistance to Canadians, helping those people who have had shifts cancelled, who have been laid off, almost 1 million Canadians laid off as of this morning. We want to help those people. We are here today to pass the measures that were announced to help people get through the next few days and weeks. What was not proposed was any kind of unlimited spending power, any elimination of the role of parliamentary oversight for months and months ahead. We believe that Parliament can function, our institutions can function. Our parliamentary system has seen this country through 2 world wars, through other public health crises, and we are prepared to cooperate, be flexible. We're here today with a reduced roster of MPs. We're going to agree to pass this package of assistance very quickly. So I believe that Parliament can continue to play its role, provide that kind of transparency and oversight that it was designed to do.
All right, that's Andrew Scheer this morning. Let me bring in the host of Power and Politics, Vashi Kapellas, and CBC's David Cochrane. So this all unfolded over the course of a number of hours last evening when a draft version of legislation was leaked. And the Conservatives immediately started talking about how concerned they were that there was this provision to give the government the ability to get money out the door, but also to change taxation for another more than 20 months. It was obviously a problem for them. And as the public pressure started to build, we saw the government move quickly back on that first proposal, I guess is how they're characterizing it. Get both of you to weigh in there. Vashi, I'll get you to start.
Yeah, they climbed down pretty quickly. It took just a few hours of pressure from the opposition and outcries on social media immediately. I think what was so surprising, and Rosie, you got your hands on a copy of that bill. I took a look through it last night, was if you do look through it, most of it is exactly what they said we were to expect, right? It's all to do with this massive aid package that is really important for Parliament to enact so that people can get the money that they need right now in order to cope with the spread of this virus and the economic impacts of it. Sandwiched in there, though, was this section that talked about unilateral taxation and spending power, which means the easy way to translate it is they don't need Parliament to approve. This minority government, this Liberal government, can do whatever they want when it comes to taxation for a really long time. There might be an argument for a finite amount of time given the situation that we're in, but anything beyond that, I think, really raised a lot of eyebrows, to put it mildly. So we saw Pablo Rodriguez very quickly, or not very quickly, maybe it took a few hours last night on Twitter, say that, basically make a statement, that's the Liberals' House leader, that they were going to climb down. And then this morning, the Prime Minister also tweeted out that that part of the bill would no longer be a part of it. I think I'm really interested to hear how exactly the Prime Minister defends it. I don't know if either of you have had any more luck than me, but I cannot get a straight answer from anyone surrounding him right now about what they were thinking and why they would have included this in this type of legislation at this point in the sort of the unfolding of this pandemic. It just didn't really add up. It seems like I was getting some answers that it was strategic in order for the Conservatives to sort of jump on that and then forget about the rest of the bill and pass all of that. But the Conservatives, to be fair to them, had signaled right from the start that they were prepared to support the economic measures that the government had said they were going to introduce, this aid package, and that's what Mr. Scheer reiterated today. They just didn't anticipate this sort of unilateral power being added to it. So will be certainly interesting to hear how the Prime Minister defends that action.
Yeah, and we moved sort of from a very collaborative approach where everyone sort of set aside their own concerns in order to get this aid package pushed through quickly to a bit of a clash yesterday, which is now maybe quite resolved. But David, I know you have some thoughts on this too.
Yeah, Rosie, it was really kind of a clumsy move that brought politics back into the pandemic. And up until this point, really, it had been a nonpartisan, whole-of-country approach to things. All of the federal opposition parties, the federal and provincial governments and municipal governments working across political ideologies, working across party lines to do what they believe is in the best interest of Canadian citizens and Canadian businesses. And this was kind of a clumsy move. And what was billed as an aid package has been defined as an overreach by the government in trying to expand its powers. Now, you can sort of understand the impulse. Do not take this as a justification for what happened last night, but in trying to understand the federal government's thought here is that they want the ability to increase payments and cut taxes and offer tax relief without having to come back to Parliament. Because even look at this process. It was last week, on Wednesday, when the Prime Minister announced the $82 billion aid package, then backed up by the Finance Minister. You then have to get things drafted. You have to send a letter to the Speaker. You have to recall Parliament on 48 hours notice, and you have to fly everybody back proportionally from across the country. Then you have to have a day in the House of Commons. Then you have to have a day in the Senate. Then you have to get royal assent, and then you can start getting your money out the door. They need to ramp up the infrastructure of government to be able to handle these things. I think they want to avoid a weak lag because of the parliamentary requirements in doing any future increases. If that was their intention, and I'm being charitable on my interpretation, that should have been telegraphed and discussed with the opposition parties well in advance of yesterday, and a 21-month time limit on that until the end of 2021. Someone should have had the political antenna and smarts to realize that that was going to be a non-starter for the opposition parties. I mean, you could see 4 weeks, 6 weeks, subject to renewal, these sorts of things. As Vashi said, a finite time frame. But essentially taking a minority finance minister up until the end of 2021 with these kinds of powers is a non-starter in non-peacetime. They didn't have these sorts of powers during the Second World War.
Yeah, and I can see on Twitter that there are Conservatives still expressing concerns about some other sections of the bill where they think that there is still too much power over too long a period of time that has been given to the government in different sections. We won't get too technical here, but that's why later at around noon we will hear from the Finance Minister inside the House of Commons. It's going to look pretty different, and you guys will be there with me. And there will be a period of time where the opposition parties can also ask some questions. But the long and short of it is that it will get passed and it will get royal assent tomorrow, and people should start getting access to the money, which seems to be what everyone agrees on right now. Yeah. I'm going to leave it there with both of you just for a moment, if you don't mind, because there's another bit of news that has developed overnight, a major story. The Tokyo Summer Olympics have been postponed now until 2021 because of the pandemic. Here's what the International Olympic Committee said just this morning. The IOC president and the Prime Minister of Japan have concluded that the games of the 32nd Olympiad in Tokyo must be rescheduled to a date beyond 2020, but not later than summer 2021, to safeguard the health of the athletes, everybody involved in the Olympic Games, and the international community. Of course, this comes just a day after Team Canada signaled that it would not send any of its athletes to Japan to participate in the Olympics, and now this big delay. Scott Russell is always a big part of our Olympic coverage, and he joins me now from Toronto. Good to see you, Scott. How big a deal is this?
Well, it's a big deal, Rosemary. This is unprecedented in terms of Olympic history. As you know, the Games have never been canceled with the exception of World War, and they haven't been postponed until now to this extent. I think the really important thing here, though, Rosemary, is that the C word was not used in today's announcement. The Games have not been canceled. They've been postponed. And I think it's most likely that the Games will be postponed for a year. There are major logistical problems to work out with that postponement, but I think the international sporting community and the IOC understands that that can be done.
It did seem to take a while for them to get there, though, at a time when I'm sure regular people were sort of saying, well, this seems obvious that you would not do this. It isn't safe. Why do we know why it took them so long to get to this place?
Well, there's a huge amount of negotiation that had to go on, Rosemary. Next year, World Championships in the major sports were slated to occur. World Athletics Championships in Eugene, Oregon, the World Aquatics Championships, swimming and diving, water polo, artistic swimming, that was all to take place in Fukuoka, Japan. That's next summer, as well as the World Artistic Gymnastics Championships in Copenhagen. So a huge amount of athletes, huge contracts, stadiums had been built. And so the IOC wanted to get all its ducks in a row in order to get the Games to replace those world championships. And I think Seb Coe from World Athletics, the head of FINA, the World Aquatics Association, as well as artistic gymnastics have all come together and said, we'll forego the world championships in order to get the Olympics off the ground. A safe Olympics, Rosemary.
I was talking to one of the women's soccer players yesterday who was, understood the decision that Canada had made, but was still upset she was missing the Olympics. Do you think that this makes it easier now for Canadian Olympians to go through the next year knowing that they're not actually missing out?
Absolutely. For the vast majority of the athletes, this is a plan and one that they can get used to and begin their training for and time their training for. Because as you know, in international sport, high performance sport, timing is everything. Here is one caveat to that, Rosemary. For some senior athletes, this may mean the end of a career. I'm thinking about Brent Hayden, the 36-year-old swimmer who was making a comeback. He won a bronze medal in London in 2012. This might be a problem, having to put off the Olympics for another year and keep ramping it up for that period of time. Melissa Bishop, the 800-meter runner. So, there is going to be some sacrifice on the part of some senior athletes with this postponement.
Okay, Scott Russell, always good to see you and appreciate you doing this from your house too. Good to see you. Take care.
You bet, Rosemary. Thanks.
All right, so obviously a huge decision, as Scott talked about there. Lots of implications for athletes, coaches, sports fans around the world who are dealing with all sorts of cancellations, obviously. But for reaction, we did reach out to Dick Pound. He's a Canadian member of the International Olympic Committee, former vice president of the committee, and he was in Montreal today.
Well, I think it's the right decision in the circumstances. It's not an easy decision, and it will create some complications, but it's certainly better than exposing all your athletes to a dangerous situation. So it was a tough call, but I think both the Japanese authorities and the IOC have done the right thing and done it in plenty of time so that people will understand what's going on. The international sport calendar will have to be rejigged because most of the international federations have their 2021 programs pretty well set. So, but I think there'll be lots of cooperation there because everybody wants the Olympics to be held and to benefit from the enormous audiences that you have.
International Olympic Committee member Dick Pound in Montreal today, responding to that major decision to postpone until 2021, at least 2021, the Tokyo Games that were scheduled for actually just 4 months exactly from today. Of course, today the major focus in this country and in this town, the nation's capital, is to try and get this financial aid package moving into the hands of Canadians. We are expecting it to pass after a number of hours of debate inside the House of Commons, limited debate. It will then move into the Senate tomorrow, and the whole thing should receive royal assent by end of day Wednesday, which of course makes a big difference to many people who are wondering how they are going to pay rent or pay bills, in the next couple of weeks. There are also businesses, obviously, affected by all of this, having to make the difficult decision to lay people off. So I want to bring in Howard Eckstein right now. He's the owner of MPH Travel. It's a travel agency based in Toronto. And obviously, as international borders continue to close, I would imagine, Howard, your business has taken a serious hit. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for, thank you, Rosemary. There's no revenue coming in now.
No.
Absolutely none. I spent the last week getting clients home, making sure they got home, changes and whatnot. But for the foreseeable future, there will be no income. And that makes it difficult. My income is completely through commissions. My other agent here is completely on commission. So we are self-employed. We don't have access at the moment to any kind of EI.
So you are one of those people, those self-employed people, who doesn't pay into EI and normally wouldn't get it. You will now get access to it. Have you already registered on the government website?
Well, it's interesting you said that. I've scoured that website, and of course I I'm symptom free, so I'm not forced to stay home. I'm not looking after a loved one, a family member, who has COVID-19. Those EI seems to be for those, but not for somebody in my boat. Now, if you're saying different, that's great. I look forward to trolling through the EI site to see if I qualify.
I am saying different, only because I listened to a lot of briefings from the ministers, and if you are self-employed, there's also measures there for you. You may not find it yet on the website, but I would imagine after this legislation passes, that will start to become more apparent.
That will be great. I mean, I got to tell you, when the Prime Minister came out, was it last week? I mean, time is fleeting here, March 18th, and talked about, how they're going to inject all this money. One of the things I did was reach out to the, what do they call it? The Business Development Bank, saying, look, I need some money. I'm not creating masks or anything, but I need an infusion of cash just to keep going. My landlord is asking me for rent. I have a communication going on at the moment, but as I said, it's the story of what's a good expression? I eat what I grow, kind of thing. If nothing's being produced, I have no revenue, no cash flow. And interesting enough, I've been in this business a long time, since 1982. MPH Travel has been in business since 1986. And although people sometimes, when you're in a group setting, which we haven't been for a while, say, what do you do? And you say, well, I own a travel agency. I sell travel. They said, I thought you guys were, non-existent anymore. The web took over. And it made me think of Mark Twain. The reports of my death was an exaggeration. And I gotta tell you, from people that I've talked to, and this week in particular, starting with last weekend, when the fear went out that we're closing the borders, and people were contacting me from Australia, where they were yet to come home, from Europe, like Dublin, Florida. Yeah. And, at least they were able to contact me, not wait on the phone. And don't get me wrong, the airlines are busy and they're doing the best job they can. I've seen some of the tweets and whatnot, horror stories, but there's more to it. People were able to reach out to me, and at least I could say to them, okay, we're going to get you home. When can you leave? Yeah. Some people couldn't leave right away. Comes to mind is someone traveling home with their cat. I mean, there's all kinds of things. Sure.
Howard, I'm gonna cut you off, not because I don't like chatting with you, but because I'm waiting for the Prime Minister to come out too. But let me tell you that my colleague David Cochran also just messaged me and told me, yes, you do qualify for the emergency support program. So if you have any trouble, you email me, and I'll send you that link if you can't find it. Howard, you're one of many Canadians who is struggling right now, and it's good to see you in such good spirits. So I wish you well. Howard Eckstein, owner of MPH Travel in Toronto. Okay, it is good to see people coping with things the best way they can, and if it means having a chat with me and a laugh or two about how they're struggling, that's good to see. Later today, Canada's two largest provinces will put into place their strongest measures yet. All non-essential services in Ontario and Quebec will shut down at the stroke of midnight. That will happen for the next 14 days. We've got the CBC's Megan Fitzpatrick at the Ontario Legislature in Toronto, and the CBC News Montreal host, Deborah Arbeck, in Montreal. I'll start with you, Deborah. What will be open, closed in Quebec? How is the government approaching this?
Okay, if you don't mind, if you'll just indulge me for a second, we just got some new information that I just want to give you, if you don't mind. It's about frontline workers who are now infected with COVID-19. 2 paramedics have been infected with the virus in the Lanaudière area. That's an area northeast of Montreal, and it includes Lavaltrie. That's an important area because that's the area where Quebec's 4 cases of COVID were reported. So 4 elderly people died at a senior's home there. We still don't know how the ambulance technicians were infected, but what we do know at this point is that they were not involved with any interventions at that senior home. So the 2 ambulance technicians now in quarantine at home. 18 other technicians who came into contact with them have been taken off the job. Some have been tested. We're still waiting to find out more about those who haven't been tested, but they're all self-isolating as far as we know at this point. And that's on top of 2 Montreal police officers who were infected and a firefighter on the island of Montreal at the Westmount station who has also tested positive for the coronavirus. So now, for the first time in Quebec, the Premier is saying that there is community transmission of COVID-19 in the province. So health officials are trying to slow that spread. Too many people are still gathering groups. So like Ontario, the Premier announced yesterday all non-essential businesses must close across the province. So it's as of midnight tonight. I'll go through that list. He knows it's disruptive. He says it was necessary, though, because of all of those new cases that we're reporting yesterday. So across the province, it's probably easier just to go through a list of what actually is open.
Yes.
Anything health-related, veterinarians, takeout restaurants, because the province still wants people to be able to get easy access to food. Deliveries will continue. So if you're working out of your home, you can still have deliveries to your home. Banks are open, hardware stores are open, public transit, all communications, including, of course, journalists can still go to work. The liquor store in Quebec, as well as marijuana stores, still open at this point. They're talking about food security still being open. So as I mentioned, you can still work at home. That's not an issue. You can still get deliveries. It's very similar to the situation that's unfolding in Ontario, but there's one big difference, and that is that construction sites here in Quebec are shutting down. So whether it's private or public, we've got a lot of big construction projects going on in Quebec right now. All of them have to shut down at midnight tonight.
I will say obviously one of the concerns that we've heard from Dr. Tam, Canada's Chief Medical Officer, is that the virus starts to infect healthcare workers, frontline workers, as you've talked about there. And that's why they get tested as some of the first people tested, because obviously they are vital to getting through this. And some of unions across the country have talked about a lack of personal protective equipment. Don't know if that is the case in this instance, but good to remind people of that. Deborah, before I let you go, there was a change in reporting that Quebec made yesterday, and so their numbers of cases sort of took a drastic, it looked like a big spike. Can you tell us anything about what that change was and why they decided to do that?
Yeah, there were a few things there. As you mentioned, a huge spike yesterday, so that Quebec now has the most cases across the country, well over 600 now. What happened is that there are a few things. First of all, our school break, our spring break, is a couple of weeks before the rest of the country. So we were getting many Quebecers coming back from vacation, many of them infected by COVID-19. So we saw those numbers spike. We're also counting cases differently now. Originally, we were sending cases out to Manitoba, to Winnipeg, to have those tests analyzed. Now we're able to do that here, so we're doing far more tests. And the government had said over the last couple of weeks, expect that we are going to see a spike because we're going to now be testing more often, and we're going to be getting a backlog of those tests. And so that's what happened over the last couple of days. They're also combining presumed cases as well as confirmed cases. So all of that combines to why we saw that spike yesterday.
Okay, Deborah Arbeck, so good to get the picture there in Quebec. Appreciate it. Let's go now to Megan Fitzpatrick. She's standing by at the Ontario Legislature in Toronto. Again, Ontario took similar moves as we stand by and wait for the Prime Minister to speak to Canadians. Megan, give us a sense of why the government made this decision and what will stay open.
So what's not allowed to stay open has to close at midnight tonight, Rosie, and stay closed for at least the next 14 days. But Premier Doug Ford did leave the door open to extend these orders beyond 14 days if the government deems necessary. So they posted a list last night of what is considered essential. In other words, what can stay open. They didn't put out a separate list of what has to close. You have to look at the list of what's allowed to stay open and then figure it out, essentially. The list is broken down into categories, and as we expected, grocery stores are on there. They can stay open. Convenience stores, pet food stores as well for pet owners out there concerned about having enough supplies for their pets. Also IT providers, office supplies stores. That's probably important for all those people that are working at home right now and might need some support. Liquor, beer, wine stores, cannabis producers, all allowed to continue operating. Food is similar to what Deborah was saying in Quebec, takeout and delivery only, still no restaurants for in-restaurant dining. Taxis can keep operating, hotels, and the difference with Quebec, as Deborah was saying, here in Ontario, construction sites can keep operating. Those are on the list of essential operations, services, and businesses. Premier Doug Ford said yesterday he has been made aware of some concerns that are being expressed about construction sites, and he essentially told some companies to get their acts together and make sure that they are providing a safe and healthy work environment for their workers. He's likely to get more questions about this today, Rosie, I expect, when he has a press conference around 1 p.m. in terms of what made the list and what didn't. Yeah. What I'm hearing from some in the business community is that there's not a lot of clarity. They're looking for more specifics on this list. They're saying it's too vague, some of those categories. So for example, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, their Ontario chapter representative was saying they're hearing from members who operate car washes. Gas stations are allowed to stay open. So if a car wash is attached to a gas station, can it operate or does it have to close down? He told me they're hearing from limo drivers. Do they count as taxi drivers? Taxi drivers are on the list, but limo drivers aren't specifically listed. So they're wondering if they can stay open or not, if they can keep working past midnight or not. They're urging the government to set up a hotline so that businesses, companies can call and ask and get a very quick answer. Yes or no, can they stay open? Can they keep working? And the Ontario Chamber of Commerce too, they put out a statement urging the government to delay the implementation of these orders, saying companies and businesses really haven't been given enough notice. And Premier made this announcement yesterday afternoon, a few hours later put out the list, and whoever's not on the list is supposed to close down at midnight tonight. They say that companies need more time to prepare and adapt to shift their operations online if they can, have their staff working at home, because the government is saying they are allowing companies to keep operating through telework, online commerce for all businesses is still allowed, but obviously companies scrambling to try and make that happen if they can. So they're asking the Premier for more time.
Okay, and as you say, an update from the Premier later. Megan Fitzpatrick in Toronto, thank you for that, appreciate it. And we are expecting, I should say, when the Premier speaks later at 1 Eastern, government sources say that he will also be announcing that hydro rates will be temporarily lowered to lower rates during the day when, in order to help people that are working from home and have to use more hydro. So we're expecting to hear that from the Ontario Premier as well. We are standing by, though, at this hour to bring you our regular now update from the Prime Minister in his home there, where he is nearing the end of his self-isolation, although he hasn't given an exact date as to when he will be able to come out and enjoy the rest of us and possibly work in the office from time to time. He is now, we are told, running a little bit late. 11:45 is now the time we are expecting to hear from the Prime Minister, 11:45 Eastern. And a reminder that today the focus here in this city and really across the country, if this affects you, and it does for so many, is the government getting those emergency aid measures passed. We heard yesterday that almost 1 million Canadians had registered for employment insurance over the past week, and on average it is something like 35,000, I believe, is the number that I last saw. So an enormous amount of people looking for this this help, and a lot more people will need it going forward. We know that too. Let's bring in the host of Power and Politics, Vashi Kapelos, and the CBC's David Cochran. David, I'm going to go to you. Let's just maybe, because our friend Howard, the travel agent, was trying to understand what he was going to have access to. I think he's relieved that he's going to get something. Maybe let's just go through what will become available once this legislation passes.
Yeah, this was the series of measures that was announced on Wednesday of last week, and since then a lot more people are going to be relying on these measures based on the states of emergencies and things shutting down. So I'm doing some of this from memory, so if I get some of the minor details wrong, please forgive me, but essentially they're creating 2 new programs that more or less provide employment insurance for just about everyone, whether you qualify for it or not. There's the emergency care benefit, which is for people who have to self-isolate and can't work, or get sick, or have to look after a sick family member, or a family member who is elderly, or have to look after a child because of the school and daycare closures. And that will get you $950 every 2 weeks for up to 14 or 15 weeks. And then there's the emergency support benefit, and this is where people like our friend Howard come into it. This is essentially creating an employment insurance-like program that is for people who are self-employed, run a small business and can't work, contractors, freelancers, or people who lose their job without having enough hours to qualify for employment insurance. So we don't know the specific dollar amounts on that, but we're told it will be comparable to what you would get if you did qualify for employment insurance. So those are the 2 direct income measures that are part of this $82 billion aid package. On top of that, there's a 10% wage subsidy for small businesses that will run for up to 3 months to try to keep as many people employed as possible. There's $55 billion in tax deferrals, which means that no business, big or small, will have to pay their corporate tax until September of this year. That's designed to keep money in bank accounts and keep cash in the economy and just improve the whole liquidity situation when people are just spending and buying less and businesses could be starved for cash. And there's also 2 other measures that will be coming. There's a boost in the GST credit, the GST rebate, that low and modest income Canadians qualify for, that you could see up to $300 for a low income individual, plus an extra $150 per child, or $400 for a couple. So that's going to come in May, and then there's going to be an unspecified boost coming to the Canada Child Benefit, aimed directly at helping people who have children and may not be able to work and have extra expenses and needs during this unprecedented time. Because, Rosie, when you look at this, and you look at the 1 million or nearly 1 million EI applications or pleas for help to Services Canada, if you look at some of the gross domestic product, the GDP projections coming out of the major economic and financial houses around the world, they're predicting for the second quarter in the United States a 24% contraction in GDP. That is 3 times higher than the worst quarter of the Great Recession when we had the financial crisis a little over a decade ago. So you're looking at just unprecedented historic economic shock running through the world economy. And this $82 billion package, as much as it will help people like Howard and stuff in the short term, the Prime Minister and everyone on down have said this is just the first step. We're going to need to do a lot more.
Yeah, and just to remind people, as you said, almost 1 million people applied last week alone. Let me just be precise on the number. On average last year, there's about 35,000 applicants per week. Services Canada is getting 140 to 150,000 calls a day. They are also hiring right now because they realize they need to ramp up their capacity. And I'll just say that in the past 10 minutes since we talked to travel agent Howard, I've had a number of tweets and a number of emails from people all asking how they do this. So there may actually be some sort of issue around where you connect if you are registering in a new way for EI. If someone wants to flip me that link, that would be great, and I will send it out on Twitter, and people can start getting themselves organized. And maybe, Vashi, that's a good place to bring you in, because it's not just people trying to understand what will be available, do they qualify, but there's also lots of issues around capacity here. There would be no one in government, I don't think, that would tell you that their EI system is fabulous and won't be overwhelmed by what we're about to see.
Look, people who are already, last year, when you point out on average, let's say 30 to 35,000 people are applying for EI a week, they were already having issues accessing that in a timely way. The system was already overburdened. I think it's a fair question to ask when you see that number explode to nearly 1 million, 929, I think is the number that you put out there, that the technical capacity will be tested. It's also fair to put forward the idea that the federal government right now isn't exactly like all of us, like everybody in this country, operating in a normal way. There are people working from home. There are VPN systems that will be tested through this. I think, we don't know know the answer to this because these measures have yet to be enacted, but I think there are fair questions to put forth about the federal government's ability to deliver this money because of technical capacity. I want to also just quickly, if you don't mind, touch on something that you and David were talking about, and that question that Howard put forth, because my inbox has also been inundated, particularly on Twitter, from self-employed people who are unsure where they fit into this package. I understand that the government has put forth that they will be able to, but the only mention of them in either of these, either the emergency care benefit or the support benefit, is if they had to stay home to take care of someone who's sick or if they had to stay home because they were sick. So I think so far, many of them have the impression that if they're just forced to be home because they had to close their business or because they don't have any business because of revenue issues, obviously, or like Howard, he just has no business at this point, that they don't know exactly where they fit in or if they will fit in. So I think the government actually does have to be more specific, and maybe that will come vis-a-vis the legislation today. But I do think it's important that they specifically address that group of small business owners. And I would also just quickly touch on something David talked about, and that is what I think we will hear from the opposition, as well as what we've already heard from groups that represent small business owners. What the government has promised today in tax deferrals is big, but it is a deferral, right? You still owe that money when it comes due. So that helps in the medium term. It doesn't help them in the long term. It's welcome, but it's not a magic bullet. The other thing is the 10% wage subsidy. That is something for people who run a business, particularly small business. It is not enough to get them going for the next 6 months or to keep them going if these measures were, say, in place for 4 months. So this is up to 3 months that they'll get that subsidy. And there are also jurisdictions around the world. Let's point to, for example, the UK or Denmark, where they're subsidizing 75 to 80%. So the government has, David's absolutely right, signaled that this is just a first step and this is the beginning. But I know that businesses, and particularly people who are self-employed, are looking for those next steps already. Yeah, those are all great points. And let me just, because I have a super producer who acts as my second brain, he sent me some information around some of these things. So the emergency care benefit that we understand is to provide income support to workers, including the self-employed, who have to stay home, don't qualify for paid sick leave or employment insurance. So if something has happened to you or you have to look after a loved one, that won't be available until April 2020. So you can't apply right now. So if you're looking online, I don't think there's anything there for you right now, but stand by, it'll be there soon. And then the emergency support benefit, that may also not be there now. So if you're looking for something and you fall into these categories the three of us have been talking about, don't panic because there's nothing there now. Today is the critical day for getting these things in place and opening up those applications. There had been a call, I know from the NDP in particular, to just start taking the applications regardless. And I don't know whether any of that has happened with Service Canada or the CRA. But if I get something more precise for people watching and following along on social media, we'll definitely tweet that out so that you know what to do once all this stuff starts to happen. I should tell you that the Prime Minister is, I am told, just about to come out of his house. You'll remember that yesterday he had that very forceful, stern message really to Canadians that enough was his language, that people needed to go home and stay home. He also then recorded a video out of his kitchen. I'm guessing one of his children did that to reiterate that same message to Canadians as we enter really a critical time for social distancing and self-isolation, according to public health experts. And he also got a bunch of Canadian celebrities to reiterate that message on social media last night. Here is the Prime Minister of Canada with his daily update.
My apologies for being a little delayed this morning. It was important that I speak with all three opposition leaders because I'm unable to join them this afternoon as the House of Commons reconvenes to pass emergency legislation on COVID-19. This legislation will help ensure that Canadians are getting the support they need during these challenging times. No matter who you are, where you live, or what you do, COVID-19 is having a real impact on your life. Small businesses are temporarily closing up shop. Hotels and restaurants can no longer accept guests. Some people are not getting paid. Others are worried about their job. Whatever your situation may be, our government is here to help. Passing this bill today means getting you the support you deserve as soon as possible. When you're trying to help get money out to people, speed is of the essence, especially in an unprecedented situation like this one. But I want to make it very clear. I believe in our democratic institutions. All of us in Parliament must work together, and Canadians need to see us doing just that. So you have my unwavering commitment. We will protect and uphold our democratic values. We will protect and uphold our democratic institutions as we deliver support to Canadians as quickly as possible. Aujourd'hui, la Chambre des communes sera rappelée pour adopter des mesures d'urgence.
Adopt emergency measures that our government announced. This is a very important step in order to give Canadians the support that they deserve. I know that people have a lot of questions about what will follow, and as I've been saying from the outset, all levels of government are working 24/7 to provide you with answers. Federal assistance announced last week for businesses and workers is on its way. At the same time, we continue to reflect on other ways of helping Canadians. What we announced thus far is only the beginning, but the work is continuing. Since the very outset, science and experts have been guiding our approach and our response to the crisis, and science and experts must continue to guide us as we come through the next little weeks. As the situation evolves, we are discovering what more we need to do, what we can do better, and we are adjusting. We will have more information and more support for Canadians in the coming days. But in the meantime, know that the entire civil service is working day and night to help you. And I want to thank all civil servants, not just at the federal level, but at the provincial and territorial and municipal levels as well, for all of their hard work.
A lot of Canadians abroad are still having trouble finding a flight to bring them home, so I want to give everyone an update. At least one more flight from Morocco has been scheduled. The first flight from Peru will leave today, and we're working on flights from Panama, Tunisia, Ukraine, in addition to the flights we've already announced from Ecuador, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Spain. On that note, I want to thank the flight attendants, pilots, border agents, and airport staff who've all played a crucial role in bringing Canadians home. They've been on the front lines of this crisis for weeks, but they continue to show up to work and bring families together. Just this past week, nearly 1 million Canadians traveled home to Canada. This would not have been possible without the people who work at our airports, at the border, and at our ports. So on behalf of all Canadians, thank you. We see how hard you're working, and we deeply appreciate it. Every day, someone asks me how long these restrictions will be in place, and the truth is, we don't know yet. But here's what we do know. The duration of this crisis will be determined by the choices we make right now, by decisions we take every single day. So if you want things to get back to normal, do your part. Stay home. And if you've just returned from abroad, go straight home from the airport and do not leave for at least 14 days. This is not a suggestion. You cannot pick up groceries or visit your parents or your friends. You need to go home and stay there. If people do not follow these guidelines, we will put much more stringent measures in place. Since the beginning, I have been in constant communication with the First Ministers. We had another call last night, and we agreed that we have to keep collaborating to ensure that all regions have what they need, including testing equipment and medical supplies. We discussed the range of challenges being faced and overcome across the country. We talked about working even more closely together to do more to keep Canadians safe. We also talked about the emergency measures that have been put in place at the provincial and territorial level. The Federal Emergencies Act is a last resort, but as I keep saying, all options are on the table. If people do not comply with expert advice and government guidelines, we will have to take additional steps. Right now, there are people who are still going to work because they have to. Pharmacists, delivery folks, postal workers, custodial staff, truck drivers, and many, many more are keeping the country running. They deserve our thanks for everything they do. But these people are more than just their job. They're somebody's mom or granddad, somebody's best friend or favorite colleague. So please, for them, stay home. And do it for the healthcare workers who we can't afford to lose during the biggest public health crisis our country has ever seen. Because here's the hard truth. If our nurses and doctors have COVID-19, they can't help you. They won't be able to treat you or your loved ones if you get sick. This is serious. The decisions you make have serious consequences, not just on your community, but on the entire country. So do your part. That's how we will keep each other safe. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Je suis maintenant heureux de prendre vos
Now
questions.
I'm happy to take your question.
Janet Silver, Global News. Prime Minister, you just talked about the need of getting money out the door as quickly as possible. Critics say this still involves a lot of paperwork. So why not send or give every tax filer a check right now? And to that end, last week alone, we had nearly 1 million people, extra people, filing for unemployment insurance. Processing times can be slow. How quickly can they expect their checks as well?
We recognize the need to help Canadians directly and quickly. People are worried about affording their groceries, they're worried about paying their rent, they're worried about how they're going to stay safe and keep their families safe when they don't have revenue coming in. That's why we've put forward measures that will get money out to them quickly. We recognize that the demand is massive across the country, and we are working very, very hard to be able to flow money to people very rapidly. But as I've said, nothing is off the table. We are looking at a broad range of measures for supporting vulnerable people, for supporting businesses, small businesses specifically, and giving more help to Canadians, and we will continue to work and roll out those measures as we move forward. Nous reconnaissons que les gens sont inquiets.
Recognize that people are worried about how they will be able to pay for their food or pay for their rent, or how they can support their family in these challenging times, particularly if their income is down or their paycheck isn't arriving. So that's why we took measures in order to get that money out to people quickly, to everyone who needs it, and we understand that it is a massive challenge for the government to flow so much money out to people, but it has to be done, and it has to be done quickly. And the measures that will be passed this afternoon will help us to help Canadians.
Hi, Prime Minister. Molly Thomas, CTV National News. We're hearing that some doctors and nurses are waiting more than a week to get test results. That obviously skews numbers as to how big of a problem this is, and more importantly, it limits the ability to trace who an infected person came into contact with. So why didn't your government enhance lab capabilities earlier to prevent backlogs here?
We have been enhancing lab capabilities. We've been increasing testing by tens of thousands of numbers every single day. But we know that there are also backlogs and challenges, particularly in more remote or more overburdened jurisdictions, to get those test results back quickly. We discussed it with the premiers last night, actually, as well. We are moving to accelerate the processes because testing is not just about giving people peace of mind. It's an essential element for the public health response that will keep us all safe. We know that massive testing has been part of the solution in places that have managed to contain or slow the spread of COVID-19. That is why we are investing significantly in increasing both our testing capacity and the speed with which we will be able to respond. We
recognize that there are challenges at this time when it comes to screening tests, and we also know that that's particularly the case in more remote areas or overburdened systems. It can take longer to get the results out, and I talked to the premiers about that last evening. It's also why we're taking measures to accelerate the screening process in order that the results can be received more quickly. Every single day, there are tens of thousands more Canadians being tested, but we have to do more. Also with respect to getting those results back, because testing someone is not just about getting information that will reassure us or allow us to change our behavior. It's also an essential measure of control of spread of the virus, as we've seen in countries around the world. We want to continue to accelerate those efforts so that we can get more testing done for everyone quickly.
CBC News. Why would your government think it's a good idea to propose a bill to broadly tax and spend without parliamentary approval until December 2021? Many opposition members say they can't support this overreach. Why would you bring politics into a pandemic?
We recognize that this pandemic is moving extremely quickly, and it is an exceptional situation that requires extreme flexibility and rapidity of response by governments to be able to help Canadians and react to a situation that we've seen is moving quickly every single day. So saying, we have a parliament that works, we have an opposition that is doing its job of making sure that we're taking the right steps the right way, and that's why we've been working on drafting the right legislation up until the last minute. We've been in close discussion with the opposition parties to find a way to both get that flexibility to be able to get measures out the door and keep in place our democratic institutions and the values that are so important to us all. We will always ensure that our system works in a robust way, both around accountability and helping Canadians as quickly as is necessary in these exceptional circumstances. And that's exactly what we're going to see this afternoon in what I'm sure will be robust but extremely cooperative and collaborative debate this afternoon in the House.
We recognize that the situation we find ourselves in now is unprecedented. The speed at which things are evolving requires much more flexible and fluid responses on the part of the government. But we also know that Parliament and the opposition parties have a critical role to play in terms of ensuring accountability and in being aware of the measures we're putting forward. And we need to ensure that our democracy works properly, even in extreme situations. And that's why the discussions we had with the opposition parties continued up until the last minute. And we made choices to ensure that there could be more recalls of Parliament so that we have the necessary flexibility. This is a democratic system that is working, and we will continue to defend our democratic values and institutions all the time. Good morning, Prime Minister. Is the telecom data being used to provide surveillance of people at home? Is this something that could happen? Well, I think we all acknowledge that we're in a situation where people's behavior and choices and the choices we make as a government may be different from what we would do in a situation that is not an emergency. But as far as I know, we are not taking measures such as the ones you referred to. As I know, everything is on the table, but this is not something that we're doing at this point in time, and it is not something that we are contemplating for the days to come.
I think we recognize that in an emergency situation, we need to take certain steps that wouldn't be taken in non-emergency situations. But as far as I know, that is not a situation we're looking at right now. But as I've said, all options are on the table to do what is necessary to keep Canadians safe in these exceptional times.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Dylan Robertson, Winnipeg Free Press. How many premiers asked you to invoke the Emergencies Act, and what is your tipping point to enact it?
We had a good discussion on the Federal Emergencies Act, recognizing that most provinces and territories, if not all, have brought in their own Emergencies Act to be able to deal with this situation. The Federal Emergencies Act is really a step above that would involve powers of coordination, of rearranging logistical supply chains chains to cover challenges in various parts of the country. It is not something that the premiers largely thought was necessary at this point. Most of them indicated that if it became necessary, they would of course support it, but they didn't feel it was there yet. I impressed upon them the need to further coordinate and provide data on things like how many ventilators they have, so that we can make sure that they are going to the areas, maybe not in their province, but next door, that need them the most, and ensure a better level of flow of emergency equipment to the places that need it. But as long as we are doing that in a robust way, there probably isn't yet a need for the Emergencies Act. But as we know, things are changing very, very rapidly. Some premiers were more open to it than others, but all of them indicated an openness to continue the discussions to make sure that we're able, as individual jurisdictions, but also as a country, to do everything necessary to keep Canadians safe.
We had a good discussion last evening with the premiers about the Emergency Measures Act. All the premiers indicated that, of course, if we come to a point where we need to invoke the federal legislation, the Emergency Measures Act, of course they will support it, but they do not believe we have reached that stage yet. So we will continue to collaborate and take whatever steps are necessary to respond to the needs of Canadians across the different jurisdictions, and we have pledged to continue to work together to have all the necessary tools to protect Canadians.
Thank you. Merci. First question is from Teresa Wright from the Canadian Press. Please go ahead. Your line is now open.
Good morning, Prime Minister. I'm wondering if you can tell me if you're worried about signs that the U.S. is keen to move away from COVID restrictions in the name of trying to help jumpstart the economy, and how such a move would impact the Canada-U.S. border agreement.
Obviously, the agreement we have with the United States is limiting all non-essential travel for tourism, for recreational purposes. We recognize the deeply integrated supply chains that go back and forth across the United States, and we'll continue to ensure that essential supplies of medication, of industrial equipment, of food continue to flow. At the same time, we are continuing in Canada to base our decisions and our recommendations and guidelines to Canadians on science. We recognize that the need for social distancing, which means keeping 2 meters apart and not gathering in groups, is going to be in place for many more weeks. And we will ensure that we are giving the support to Canadians, to small businesses, so that as we get through this, we are able to restore the economic activity that keeps us all prosperous when it is safe to do so. Our priority is keeping Canadians alive and healthy, and that is what we will continue to focus on in Canada.
Merci. Prochaine question.
Thank you. Merci. Next question is from Steve Shear from Reuters. Please go ahead.
Hello, Prime Minister. Today, the WHO said that the United States could become an epicenter for the coronavirus. You already have border controls in place for non-essential travel, but are you prepared to do more to get tougher on the border? We've heard anecdotally that truckers, for example, are just asked, if they're healthy or not. So is the government prepared to do more on the border, and what could that be?
As I've said, we are braced for a broad range of scenarios. We have put contingency plans for next steps depending on what trajectory the virus takes in Canada or indeed around the world. We are looking at a broad range of things. Nothing is off the table, but we will respond every step of the way with the necessary actions at a given moment. At this time, we feel the measures that we have taken to restrict flow across the border to essential travel and essential goods to goods and essential travel is the important thing that we're doing to keep Canadians safe. Of course, as the situation evolves, we will be ready to shift our posture with that.
Je vous remercie beaucoup. Dernière question.
Thank you. Merci. Next question. Prochaine question. L'inaudible, la presse canadienne. À vous la parole.
Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau.
Good morning,
Une question
Mr.
très
Trudeau.
précise. La
A very
fonction publique,
specific question.
manifestement, est pas capable
The
de
civil
gérer en ce moment
service
ces demandes d'assurance
is
emploi.
working very hard. A lot of people are applying for EI. The unions are somewhat concerned. Can you tell us why do you not send the money directly to businesses and people so that they can get that money right away? We will be doing both. We are sending direct aid to workers that qualify for EI or don't qualify, and we will also be helping businesses to keep people on their payroll and not have to lay them off. We know that in a situation such as this, there is not a single solution that will work for everyone or for every family. So we need a number of different measures and different ways of getting the necessary help to families, and we will do that in a number of different ways. It's not one or the other. It's all necessary measures at the same time.
Merci beaucoup. C'est qu'est-ce qui mettra fin à la conférence de presse?
Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Bonne journée.
That is the Prime Minister of Canada. They're going back into his home where he is self-isolating right now. But on the other part of your screen, and we can pop that up in a moment, you saw the Speaker's Parade to open up this day of this extraordinary day of the House of Commons sitting to indeed pass the legislation that is needed in order to get some of these important financial measures out to Canadians as soon as possible. Let me just go quickly. Okay, I'm just going to go very quickly to the Premier of Nova Scotia because he's on the line and I don't want to lose a chance to talk to him before we go inside the House of Commons. Nova Scotia, of course, declared a state of emergency over the weekend. Premier McNeil was watching the Prime Minister, spoke with him last night and joins me from Halifax. Premier, good to see you. So I understand there was a conversation between premiers and the Prime Minister about the Emergencies Act, and there doesn't seem to be broad consensus that it is needed right now. After you declared that state of emergency, have you seen a shift in behavior in your province?
Well, there's no question Nova Scotians are following the advice of the Chief Medical Officer now. The public gatherings that we were seeing last weekend are no longer happening. They know there's fines associated with it. My message to the Prime Minister last night was use every available tool they have to ensure that we protect Canadians. The reality of it is the vast majority of Canadians, the vast majority of Nova Scotians are responding to the call and the advice of Chief Medical Officers. But for those who aren't, we need to use every tool we can to keep the rest of us safe.
So what would be sort of the breaking point then, do you think, for premiers, for everybody to say, okay, go ahead and do this, we need that added support?
Well, I don't want to speak for the other premiers. I'll speak for Nova Scotia. And the reality of it is people need to follow the advice of Chief Medical Officers and go home. Self-isolate for 14 days if you've been outside, in our case, outside of our province. No exceptions. If we are going to in any way prevent the spread of this virus, it will require all of us to follow that advice and go home.
Obviously what's happening in Ottawa today, critical for people across the country to try and get these additional financial measures out to Canadians. How are people in Nova Scotia coping from an economic perspective?
Well, obviously, people are very scared. We're a province and a region that's built on small business, many of whom would not be able to make available unemployment insurance. So we're looking for flexibility. My message to the Prime Minister was last night, these extraordinary times, we need to make sure, first of all, that we can get the money out quickly, that we broaden the people that are able to hit it, to qualify for it. For example, a small business owner, in my view, should be able to qualify for unemployment insurance, and allow companies to basically stack on top of unemployment insurance to keep their employees whole. Because the reality of it is, in order for our economy to come out of this when we're through it, it will require those businesses still be there. And I'm afraid if there is not the kind of flexibility and funding for companies, many of them will fail.
Okay, Premier, I'm going to let you go because the House is getting started, but I do appreciate you making time during this busy time. Take care of yourself and the province.
Thank you. All the best.
Thank you. All right, so let us go inside the House of Commons there, where you see Bruce Stanton. He is one of the deputy speakers. The Speaker of the House of Commons is up in Northern Ontario and didn't travel down here today. I should tell you that there are a limited number of MPs in the House, and while normally they would be required to sit in their own seats for this sort of proceedings, obviously social distancing being demonstrated inside the House too. So you will see them further apart than normal, and of course very few numbers in there at all. There's also a reduced number of staff inside the chamber to try and make sure that everybody is well protected here. Just before we start to hear from the Finance Minister, Bill Morneau, who will sort of make the argument and explain what this legislation is doing, let me just highlight a couple of things from the Prime Minister there. First of all, having to clarify after what the opposition called an overreach by the government yesterday, that he has an unwavering commitment to uphold democratic institutions, meaning they are going to find ways to make do and make sure that everybody is held to account for their decisions. So some reassurance there from the Prime Minister after a difficult, let's say, 12 hours in terms of getting to this place. He also confirmed that there will be the first flight from Peru will leave today with Canadians aboard, 2 more this week. Other flights scheduled for Panama, Tunisia, and Ukraine. They are working on those. And finally, he said about the employment insurance, and I've just tweeted out a link for people who were asking about it. He says that the demand is massive, nothing is off the table, and they realize that they need to get things to people quickly. So what they are going to talk about here today, after Royal Assent tomorrow, then you will start to see more information on the Canada.ca website. You'll be able to contact Service Canada to see if you qualify, because while self-employed people will qualify under one of these measures, if you are a small business owner, I'm not sure where you fit into that. So we'll get you more information when we have it. But this is a critical moment both for the government and for the country as the beginning of financial aid starts to get discussed and then finally passed in order to flow to Canadians as quickly as possible. Okay, here's Pablo Rodriguez. He's the government House leader. Let's listen to him.
To the call of the chair after consultation with the House leaders.
Accordingly, the House will remain suspended at the call of the chair.
So there will be some procedural things happening here as the House returned for this extraordinary moment in our history. And I'll bring in David and Vashi as I need them. The people that are in the chamber right now, so they're not going to get going right away, but the people that are in the chamber right now are all people who are within driving distance of Ottawa. That's who they decided would be here, or if there were cabinet ministers already in town because they've remained here to do their work, that's who will also be there as they move forward for about a 4-hour session, which we won't bring you all of because that would be a lot. But we'll bring you some of the key moments from the Finance Minister, Opposition Leader, and what you have you. Vashi Kapellas and David Cochrane, I'll just bring you in as we wait for things to get underway there. And maybe we can just circle back. I wanted to get the Premier in, excuse me, don't like to keep Premiers waiting, but circle back to some of the things the Prime Minister had to say. I'll start with you, Vashi.
Yeah, a couple of things that jumped out for me. And the first is, I think, on sort of the political undertone to what's happening today. You have already summarized for our viewers what happened overnight, how essentially the opposition accused the government of tacking on this measure that would have given it, unilateral power to change taxes or to change spending for a long time, till the end of 2021. So they backed down off of that. It appears that the opposition thinks so far, at least from their tweets, and I'm thinking of finance critic for the Conservatives, Pierre Poilievre, as well as the leader of the Conservatives, Andrew Scheer, that they haven't backed down enough. So far, they're saying there's some other stuff in there. So I think that's something for our viewers to watch as we see this all unfold in Parliament today. How does the debate, which, as you said, we're anticipating to be about 4.5 hours, how does it go? Are they able to, it seems like they will be able to reach, obviously, agreement on the broad strokes of this bill, and particularly where the financial aid is concerned. But how does this factor into it? He was asked by Olivia Stefanovich, one of our colleagues, about why they included it, and he didn't really provide a specific answer. He sort of talked about the need to respond to a fluid situation, which is something that sort of David alluded to earlier, that perhaps that's why they felt they needed that kind of power. But then in talking to the opposition parties, they wanted Parliament to remain. As you said, he tried to provide some reassurance that, should parliamentary oversight be necessary, everybody can perform that kind of function. But I don't really feel that he actually spoke to the strategy behind including it. And particularly, she asked, why did you bring politics into the pandemic, which again is something that David highlighted, and he didn't really provide an answer on that as well. So that's one thing that I think will continue to dog the government today during this discussion. He talked about a bunch of other stuff, and you actually brought it up with Stephen McNeil, the Premier of Nova Scotia, that Emergencies Act, whether or not they're going to invoke that. I think that is a big question. From my information, in particular, the Premier of Quebec is opposed to that happening right now. The Prime Minister said that basically it didn't seem, broadly in the discussion, it did not seem like the premiers were asking for it to happen. Blaine Higgs, the Premier of New Brunswick, I believe is one of the only ones to publicly say that is something that might be necessary. But it does seem from any conversation that I have that they are still a distance away from enacting anything like that.
Okay, just as you've been talking, I just sent a couple of texts there. So it seems that the House has suspended, Pablo Rodriguez, the House Leader, has asked that the House be suspended until later today. And I'm told by a couple of people that it's because they are still negotiating on the legislation itself. So this is a little more complicated than we thought it would be, a little more complicated probably than it even needs to be. But this is the opposition doing their work here to make sure that they ask the right questions and that everybody gets the right piece of legislation that they can support. A reminder that first draft piece of legislation that people received, including opposition parties, was going to allow the government to put in different taxation measures and spending measures up until December 2021. There was a period of negotiation last night. Finally, the Prime Minister concluding that and the House Leader saying that would be removed. But now, and maybe it's some of those things that you were talking about there, Vashi, some of the things that Pierre Poilievre, who is self-isolating actually right now as he awaits a COVID test, is highlighting. Maybe some of those things are also of concern. And so negotiations continue, I guess, between House leaders and critics about what this is actually going to look like. I'll maybe let you do a little texting too. And I'll go to David to get his to get his perspective as well on things. And obviously, if the House is suspending and we have to come back later, or we'll hand over coverage to whoever else. But it seems to be what's at play right now, David.
Yeah, I have some information. An opposition MP who would be in a position to know messages say they are suspended until 1:50 Eastern. Okay. So nearly 2 Eastern time. So the House is going to be on break for at least another hour and 40 minutes as they sort out this unpopular piece of legislation, or at least a piece of legislation with unpopular segments. And now that back and forth is happening. So what looked like was going to be a bit of a unity parliament, a reduced unity parliament, it's now kind of business as usual at unusual times as they try to haggle over what actually they're going to vote on and approve today. Presumably would still happen today and then go to the Senate tomorrow. So that is the latest we have from an opposition MP, because, we all expected this to get going, wham, bam, and it would be done. Well, nothing quite goes as planned, in the middle of the COVID-19 outbreak. I'm told they are still negotiating, and the way the motion works, on the way the motion will work, and as soon as they pass, they're still negotiating, essentially. You're right, Rosie. They're going to figure out how it's done. So if we start, essentially, they're done, and there's no way that this motion is going to pass the way it is currently done.
And that, of course, follows the Prime Minister having to come out and say off the top of his briefing today that he believes in our democratic institutions, that he has an unwavering commitment to uphold them, and that he wants to work with the opposition parties to get this done. So I don't think anyone should question that it will get done. There seems to be, at least on the aid package itself, an enormous amount of goodwill there from everyone. It's in some of the details in terms of how far the government can go on some of those measures. And the opposition, when the House is not sitting, it's difficult to perform your duty as an opposition parties, but these are the moments when they do have to step up and make sure, particularly in a minority parliament, that they are asking the right questions and getting the right kind of answers. I don't know if you have more information, Vashi.
absolutely right. They are still negotiating, and that it could, I'm hearing from two people in the government that could last a few hours, that they don't know exactly from the government's perspective, at least, how long that is going to last. They're providing for as much time as possible so that they don't sort of mess up any other timeline that was set for the afternoon, but which we know are very important timelines, especially taking a step outside of Ottawa and outside of Parliament for people who are awaiting news on this financial help. But they seem to think that given what negotiations are taking place right now, they will still be able to complete what they needed to complete today. But we might be looking at a delay of up to a few hours at this point.
Okay,
yeah, and
good.
Rosie,
Rosie,
if I can, one of the things I'm being told now, one of the concerns from the opposition parties is that once this is tabled and passed, there's no way to come back and amend it, just the way Parliament is working right now, and there's no amending process. So this is one of the things they're trying to sort out in these negotiations, and essentially what I am told is that once you see the House of Commons come back from the suspension by the chair right now, it means the negotiations are over, and this is all going to be done because it will only come back if there is that cross-party support to get this done.
That's an important point. This is not a situation where there will be an enormous amount of time adding amendments and studying it. They want this to happen today, and they want the bill to receive royal assent, I was told, by about 3 p.m. tomorrow. So listen, this is the way Parliament works. It sometimes gets messy, but it is awfully important. I think everyone agrees that the measures are awfully important, and getting that additional aid to Canadians as quickly as possible. You heard it from the Prime Minister, civil servants working full out to try and put the systems in place to make sure that will happen as well. So a slight change of plans and a slight delay in terms of how this unfolds. The government and the opposition parties now taking a short break, as Vashi says, a few hours potentially, to try and sort out some of the final details of this legislation. They will come back later. We will hear from the Finance Minister, and we will get some explanations around what this final version will look like. And let's hope that it gets done today, because I do know and have received so many emails from so many of you who are waiting for this to happen. As we stand by, we are waiting for an update from the Chief Public Health Officer, Canada's Chief Public Health Officer, Dr. Theresa Tam, who will be doing a briefing today, mostly on her own, if I'm not mistaken, because the cabinet ministers that normally accompany her have, of course, moved into the House of Commons to do their parliamentary work there and, I guess, be part of these negotiations as needed. While we try to figure out what is happening next, let me go to our friend Dr. Peter Lynn, CBC's medical contributor, and he joins me from Toronto. Good to see you again, Dr. Lynn.
Good to see you, Rosie.
So I'll take a pause from the parliamentary stuff, the parliamentary decisions and things that are going on, and which are very important, obviously, for Canadians. Just to talk about things from a health perspective, I noticed that the WHO, and I believe the Prime Minister was asked about it today, is now signaling that the United States will soon or is already the epicenter of this disease. And the Governor of New York, Governor Cuomo, is saying that the number of tests are doubling at a very rapid pace there. How concerning is it to you that our neighbor to the south, okay, we've restricted entry at the border, but still, our neighbor to the south is now becoming a case of a real problem of containment of these cases?
Yeah, so basically they have obviously community spread, which means that they cannot track the people, which now means their social distancing or that physical distancing is so important. And I think the key thing to remember is that their numbers are jumping up, let's say 5,000, 6,000 per day. Our numbers here are jumping up in terms of 100, 200 per day. So there is a good chance that we can still contain it, because now we have returning travelers. If we tackle them very well and make sure they're isolated away from other folks, then we keep their cases small. There will be increasing cases over the days to come in Canada, but hopefully once we get over the travel, we won't be importing the cases, and hopefully we don't transmit to each other. One thing I want to point out is that when is this whole thing going to be over? And that has some impact on this $82 billion. Is that enough? How much more billions do we need to pour in? And that is, in order for us to have things lifted, we would need zero new cases for at least 3 weeks before we can say that we're over that incubation period. So imagine that we're in the 200, something like that ballpark initially. It jumped yesterday because we've changed the testing. There are more tests coming through. We're getting through the backlog. But if we can get that number back downward towards that zero, that's when we can start thinking about lifting these sanctions or whatever you want to call these things that have been limiting. But so far in the world, nobody has reached a zero. So China hasn't reached a zero. South Korea hasn't reached a zero. So this is why that social distancing, that physical distancing is so important, and not transmitting it within your family is so important. Because as soon as we can hit zero, then that means that we're in that clear period. And the United States is not going to hit zero anytime soon because their numbers are increasing rapidly.
Okay, a smart perspective, Dr. Lin. I'm going to let you go because our top doctor here is also talking, and we'll come back to you if needed. Here's Dr. Theresa Tam, Canada's Chief Public Health Officer.
For my cough or sneeze and others. We also have to avoid coming into contact with the many surfaces that can be contaminated with the virus, like doorknobs, elevator buttons, handrails, counters, etc. This is why, for high-risk people, it is safest to stay inside the home as much as possible. And if you do need to venture out for fresh air, keep your hands away from your face and practice meticulous hand washing for 20 seconds as soon as you are back home. Canadians of all ages are joining in this public health effort and doing it in caring ways that show us how deep our humanity runs. In New Brunswick, a kid once more hand-colored words of encouragement in crayon. These words posted in the window for social distancing walkers to see. And it says, "We all have to do hard things." So I am your earworm, your broken record. It's important to reinforce these recommendations. So play it forwards. Canadians are used to doing hard things. Let's not tire or give up too soon. We need to get this done. So let's plank that curve. Thank you.
Bonjour tout le monde. On dénombre plus de 380 000 cas de COVID-19 dans les 195 pays du monde. Au Canada, on recense actuellement 2
In Canada, as of this moment, there are 2,176 cases of COVID-19 and 25 deaths. This morning, 220 repatriated passengers from the Grand Princess, who were symptom-free at the end of their 14-day quarantine period, were released from CFB Trenton. Other passengers who tested positive for the virus will remain at CFB Trenton until their new release date, along with their asymptomatic contacts whose quarantine period was reset. Over 120 people in Canada have been tested so far, which represents an average of about 10,000 people tested per day. According to available information, there is an almost equal mix of travelers who were exposed to the virus outside of Canada and their close contacts, and of cases who were exposed in a community setting in Canada. To reduce the travel-related cases, travelers coming into Canada must self-isolate in their home for 14 days, even if they are not showing any symptoms. As long as you remain asymptomatic, it's okay to go outside for a walk while keeping at least 2 meters away from others. It is very important to remember to follow the instructions of local health authorities. For the rest of the population, we must all create a 2-meter zone of protection around ourselves and to protect vulnerable groups by practicing social distancing. 2 meters is the distance that infected droplets can spread from a cough or sneeze. We must also avoid coming into contact with the many surfaces that can be contaminated with the virus, like doorknobs, elevator buttons, handrails, counters, etc. That is why it is safest for high-risk people to stay inside their home as much as possible. If you do need to go outside for fresh air, keep your hands away from your face and practice meticulous hand washing for 20 seconds, soaping up and scrubbing the back and the palms of your hands and between your fingers as soon as you are back home. Canadians of all ages are joining in this public health effort and are doing it in caring ways. It shows us how deep our humanity runs. In New Brunswick, one small hand colored in showed encouraging words, saying, "We all have to do hard things." This was in the window so that social distancing walkers could see it. Canadians are used to doing hard things. We must not waver or give up too soon. We have to get this done. Let's do what needs to be done to plank the curve. Thank you.
We will now open the floor and the telephone line to questions. We'll start with questions in the room and then go on the phone. CTV.
Hi there, Rachel Haynes here from CTV. My first question, Dr. Tam, is about the Michael Garron Hospital in Toronto. They did a
all right, this is the regular briefing that we get normally from the Cabinet Committee on COVID-19 and the Chief Public Health Officer. Today, Cabinet ministers busy trying to get this critical piece of legislation passed. So I want to wrap up here on the main network with my colleagues Vashi and David before we go back to Dr. Tam and bring you all the information you need there. Okay, Vashi, a strange turn of events here, to say the least.
A very strange turn of events. So what we had anticipated was that these 30 or so members of parliament would be in there at this moment debating for about 4 hours the legislation that they need to enact in order for the financial aid package that the government first proposed last week to actually come into play. So to come into effect so that Canadians can access that money. What ended up happening as we were watching was that all of a sudden Pablo Rodriguez, the leader of the Liberals, the House leader for the Liberals, stood up and suspended things. What we are being told is that is because they are still negotiating over some of the various aspects of this bill. And specifically, I would drill down onto the fact that that negotiation could take up to a couple hours, we're being told. I think that number is very fluid. I think it could definitely change. But also on this whole issue that came into play last night on the idea of the Liberals sort of inserting into this legislation not just things that have to do with the financial aid package, but at first at least a sort of unilateral power to tax and spend that was then removed. But there are some other parts of the bill as it currently stands that the Conservatives say also give the Liberals too much power. So that's a bit about what the negotiations are right now. And we are expecting, as I said, them to take maybe up to a few hours, at which point the House would resume and we would see some debate or the progression of this bill.
Okay, and there's various meetings and calls happening right now as we speak to try and get to a place where everybody can agree on things. I would say that the Prime Minister, when he was asked about why they did this, the answer was that they require extreme rapidity in order to react to this and lots of flexibility. So I take that point. I think it's an important one, David, as the government looks for the fastest way to get help out to people. But there is also the accountability aspect that the government can't just, does have to have a certain check and balances in terms of how it's handing out a huge amount of money.
Yeah, and Rosie, there's another developing situation that I'm trying to understand, and this is Scott Reid, who's a Conservative MP from Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston, sort of here in rural Eastern Ontario. He is not supposed to be part of the 32 MPs who are in the House of Commons today. He has tweeted and posted on his webpage that he will be in Parliament over the objections and advice of his party leadership and his party whip, because he is extremely uncomfortable with the measures in this legislation, and in fact says he's uncomfortable in the authorities that the government was given when the House suspended on February 13th. And he is going to the House of Commons, he says, with the intention of denying unanimous consent, which is what all of these negotiations hinge on, to allow for the speedy passage of this aid package, unless there are some limiters put in place on what the government can do. So he's not only uncomfortable with what was in the draft legislation last night, he's uncomfortable retroactively with the spending authorities that his own party leadership agreed to when the House of Commons was suspended on Friday the 13th until April the 20th to allow government to operate and respond to the pandemic crisis. So this is something none of us saw coming, but Scott Reid is defying all of the medical advice to stay away and all of the political advice to stay away, and he says he's going to be in the House of Commons, and he is not going to let this pass unless he gets some changes that he wants to see.
Okay, I'll leave it there with both of you for now. Vashi Kapelis and David Cochrane, thank you for your coverage here on CBC's main network. Just to bring you up to speed on what may seem very procedural inside the House of Commons right now, something you don't probably normally watch very closely, but the reason it's important, of course, is that the government and opposition parties are trying to get together to collectively and very quickly pass an $82 billion stimulus package, an aid package to you at this this moment of the coronavirus pandemic. $27 billion, which is directly money coming to you. The rest is tax deferrals. There was a hope that that could be done by end of day tomorrow, but now both sides are negotiating around some concerns. It would seem the Conservatives have ongoing concerns around how much power the government has been given in this piece of legislation. So the House suspended for now, but we'll be back later this afternoon. We'll, of course, bring that to you live as it develops. And I'll just tell you that as we go back to the Public Health Agency press conference on CBC News Network and CBC.ca, Dr. Theresa Tam, Canada's Chief Public Health Officer, says that COVID-19 cases are now almost an equal mix between travelers and their close contacts. And so that shows us, of course, that COVID-19 is starting to spread inside the community. That is the exact reason that we have heard from her again and from the Prime Minister so sternly yesterday that social distancing and self-isolation is so important, they say right now, to try to contain the pandemic and to stop or limit that community spread, which now appears to be happening in most parts of this country. So a couple things to keep your eye on then throughout the day. This update on what happens with the legislation. We'll hear more about that. Repatriation flights, further ones the Prime Minister announced today, including one from Peru as of tomorrow and an additional one from Morocco today. And of course, to see whether Canadians have indeed listened to these increased calls from premiers and the Prime Minister to socially distance yourself from other people, go home and stay home, they say. You can watch more coverage on CBC News Network and CBC.ca, but I'm Rosemary Barton here on CBC with your special coverage. We will see you again soon. Take good care.